Welcome in, Pirates Nation, to episode 5 of Pirates Weekly. Your hosts, Oliver Nissi and Leverett Ball. This week we are back on Zoom, and joining us is Massachusetts Pirates play-by-play broadcaster, Mick Moninghoff. Mick, it is a pleasure to have you. And I'll start with this. I love your background. I love, people nowadays, they have that background, and I'd say yours is up there for the best that I've seen.
Well, I appreciate that. They're real. So, yeah, there's 3 Emmys behind me. And I know it was last year they'd gone to a new league, but there is an NAL ball up there. We're keeping that out of the sight line. And we're going with the China Arena Football League ball. So
nice.
That's what we got back behind us tonight.
Well, Mick, as I said, and most people know, you are the voice of the Massachusetts Pirates. The Pirates now entering their 3rd season on the field. And before we get into the Pirates and, their days in the NAL, like you mentioned, and, we're going to talk about a little bit, not too much about the new league and the IFL. But Mick, I want to start with your broadcasting background. And, you've been a broadcaster for some time. I know you've done some work in the old Arena Football League, and you've also done work in other football leagues as well. But why don't you just walk us through Leverett, myself, and Pirate Nation? Why don't you walk us through your time as a broadcaster, how it started and how it's going?
Well, I always wanted to be a broadcaster. And I said when I was in high school, I'm going to have a pro career, probably in basketball, and then I'll go into broadcasting. Well, we never got the pro career in basketball. But I was lucky enough to get into Temple University in Philadelphia, went there and became a sports director of their college radio station. And back then, before it went NPR, the students really had a grasp on doing the events. So I had a chance as, somebody in my late teens, early 20s to broadcast Temple baseball, basketball, football. So I actually broadcast a football game at the old Pitt Stadium where some sophomore quarterback was supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he was starting for the first time in his career. Some guy named Dan Marino, so watching Dan Marino play. And then I did some games at Penn State back when I think Matt Millen was playing there, and they had just come off a national championship, and had a chance to broadcast a Temple game at the Meadowlands. They used to have the Garden State Bowl. And a lot of people say, Garden State Bowl. Yeah, but it was one of the top 5 payout bowls in the country at the time. Well, Temple played Cal and beat Cal and finished 18th, 19th in the country that year. And it was like the last time they were ranked before Matt Rule got into Temple, a couple of years back. So that's how it all started. And then people will say, well, what do you do? Where do you go? You start at the bottom. We used to work for a score service. It was called Dial It National Sports. It was before the internet, so you had to dial the 1-900 number to get the score updates. It was basically a glorified gambling service because Sunday afternoon was your big time. So what would happen is you'd be doing these updates, and the gamblers would be calling to get the scores, especially at the end of that 1 o'clock game, because if they were ahead or behind, they had to either double down or whatever for the 4 o'clock game. So that's what the call volume time was all about. So, then the internet came and that stuff went away. But went to Nebraska for a year and called 82 games of college football, high school football, basketball, things like that. Came back and just kept looking to get some work. I was lucky to work in some radio in the Lehigh Valley, Easton, Allentown, Bethlehem in Pennsylvania. And then one day got into cable TV. And at the same time, I hooked on with Lehigh University and did all their athletic events on the radio and a little bit on TV with wrestling for about 6 years. So, from there, it was on to Philadelphia, the Comcast network, where I picked up a couple of those things behind me. And there we did everything. It was just like going back to Temple. So we did Big 5 basketball, and I had a chance to be a play-by-play announcer for our AHL package. So, and there's where I first started working with big names, and the people in New England are going to know Brad Park. They're going to know Jerry Cheevers. old Boston Bruins. Andy Brickley, who's one of their broadcasters, I had worked with him, and Oris Kinderchuk when we did games in Philadelphia, who was on the Flyers Stanley Cup teams in the 70s. So, it all worked out. Did some Ivy League football, CAA football, stuff like that. And then one day somebody said to me, I was doing a Philadelphia Soul game on the radio. You want to go to China? Yeah. And you know who really pushed me to go to China? Was JJ Ratterman. I had met JJ when I was working as a sports director in the Midwest. And we became pretty good friends, stayed in touch. His name came up in the draft. I said, are you going to China? Yeah. Are you going? Sure. So we went. And that's how I met Jawad, and that's how I got hooked up to the Massachusetts Pirates. So it all came full circle, and arena football had a lot to do with the broadcasting in my career.
Well, and you've had a lot of stops, obviously, and, I've had a chance to know you for a few years, but for you personally, as far as your growth as a broadcaster and those stops along the way, what are some ways that you've improved over the years as a broadcaster from, getting started at Temple, like you said, all the way until now as the Pirates play-by-play guy? And also, when you first started broadcasting, you were trying to improve your skill set. Did you have any influences or specific broadcasters you tried to emulate?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I wouldn't try to say I tried to emulate Marv Albert, but when I was growing up, Marv was like, he did the Knicks, the Rangers, and he had his regular sports gig on TV at Channel 7 in New York. How about, like people said, well, would you rather do this or that? He did everything. So yeah, I want to do everything too. And you aspire to that. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Now, there's a lot of broadcasters who I like, but I think the biggest thing is to try to be yourself. And that only comes with time. And you really have to, I wouldn't say it's a style. It's just, you become your style, if that makes sense. Because, I'm not trying to develop this or that. I'm just perfect what I can do. The biggest things I always try to do were learn the rules, make sure I know what I'm talking about in the game. And yes, I was on with an IFL coach just the other night, going over some of the new rules that he called a friend of mine. So then the other thing is, because I haven't seen many IFL games yet, I'm going to be totally honest. But I have seen a lot of games in the AFL and NAL. So there are some nuances that are going to change. But A, know the rules. B, correct pronunciation. And there's some Pirates that I'm going to probably lean on Leverett, and yourself and Oliver just to go over certain things. But I always meet those players before the game. And especially when you're dealing with and not necessarily calling the Pirates a minor league sport, because they're not really. But it makes no difference what level. I always go into the locker room well before the game, talk to the players, talk to the coaches, and actually go with the equipment manager over all the jerseys because invariably somebody says, oh, Oliver Nissi's wearing 27 tonight, and nobody picks up on it. It doesn't come out in any notes. So you got to go find out for yourself. So those are the things that I try to do. And most importantly for me, stay on top of the play. I don't want to say, Brackett's back to throw. He's throwing deep, touchdown. Oliver Nissi. No, I don't want to do it. What I want to say is, Brackett's back to throw. He's looking for Oliver Nissi, touchdown. So I want to be ahead of that call. I want to be on top of the call. And I think that those announcers who do that, yeah, they're in tune with what's going on. And that's what I try to do and bring that excitement to the game. If I can do those things, I'm going to be okay.
Mick, I love how you brought up, I love how you brought up Marv Albert. That's someone like myself who, got into sports now, working with the Pirates, but Marv Albert's one of those early names that really caught my eye from the broadcast booth. And, I was actually watching this thing on NBC Sports Boston the other night. It was the Tommy Heinsohn, Mike and Tommy Heinsohn, 30 years for the Celtics. And one thing that stood out, and when I think of Marv Albert, I think of I don't know what to call it. It's the broadcasters have a specific go-to phrase, I guess you can call it. So Marv Albert's
was always yes,
yeah,
and it counts. Yeah.
And Mike Breen is another guy I think of. He says bang, and then
Mhm.
Mike Gorman, he talked about his Mike Gorman's has got it. So Mick, do you have a go-to phrase?
I have one in baseball. Tag time. Tag time? Yeah. Well, and a friend of mine, Scott Graham, who does the NFL
Oh yeah.
pregame shows,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
I've worked games with Scott, and one day he goes, "Yeah, that makes sense. A ball was tagged, and what time is it? Oh, it's tag time. That ball's out of here. That kind of thing." So yeah, tag time was probably the phrase that I used. Calling some minor league baseball games. I've done games in the Sally League, South Atlantic, Double A, and even A ball in the Quad Cities a little bit. So yeah, I had a chance to do some baseball too.
Well, and have you had outside of the Pirates? I know you've worked in various sports, various levels of sports. And you've had different roles from TV play-by-play, like you do with the Pirates, to some radio stuff. I know you've also done some stuff as a multimedia producer, a little bit of everything. But between the various sports, various levels, and various roles, outside of your work with the Pirates, do you have a favorite job from your time as a broadcaster?
Wow, favorite job. Well, I like being a play-by-play announcer. If you want to say,
Mhm.
would you rather be a sideline reporter or an anchor, somebody at the anchor desk, or being on location? I like doing all those things, and that's why I referenced Marv, because Marv, not so much now, but back when he was, what I think it was WABC in New York TV. Yeah, he did everything. He was at the desk. I mean. The guy who would come to mind now, the guy who does that probably would have been Boomer, right? At ESPN. So, he had a chance to do games, still came after retirement, still comes back and does the fastest 3 minutes in football on Monday night. So, yeah, I mean, I like being a play-by-play announcer, yes. But hey, if we need to go to work today, let's go.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Boomer, because that's arguably my favorite. Home Run Derby comes around. It's back, back, back. Nothing beats that. But Mick, I want to circle back to, you're talking about China when you're talking about your broadcasting career. And, we're in the United States. I'm in Massachusetts. Leverett and I are Massachusetts. I'm spacing. Are you in Virginia? Is that where you're from?
No, Easton, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
I'm 90 miles north of Philadelphia.
Okay. Okay. So you're in Pennsylvania, but China's on literally the other side of the world, but you've been there. So something that I've referenced I'm not sure if it was last episode of Pirates Weekly, but it was in one of them, was the Great Wall of China. Did you ever get a chance to go there?
Yes. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to go a lot of places in China because it was a small media group and we were charged with doing everything. So I spent a lot of time writing and announcing and getting the Chinese Mandarin pronunciations correct. But no, I did go to the Great Wall. As a matter of fact, if you look on some of my videos, if you Google them, you'll find, I think, the Shenzhen Naja going to the Great Wall, and I kind of documented their trip. And that's the one thing, and I've even talked to my wife about this the other day. I can't believe, like, when you get to the Great Wall, it goes on for thousands of miles. And the thing about the Great Wall is it was built on the highest peaks. So it wasn't like they just got all this brick and mortar and built this wall. No, they went to the highest point in a terrain, and wherever the highest peak is, that's where the wall is, because it was to keep other invading countries out.
Mm-hmm.
So they could start fires, and you look on the horizon, you'd always see the smoke, and there's something's coming, because it was on the highest peak. It's amazing. It just goes on, and it's like you marvel at the ingenuity and the fact that they did this. It took hundreds of years. It's just fabulous.
Well, and we talked a little bit before we got on this about your experience in China. We know that was how you first met Jawad. The Pirates founder, GM, and team president was in China, but that was actually before Jawad's sports management career. If I remember correctly, he was actually an active player in China. He was playing quarterback. So how did all of that develop? I mean, Pirates' current quarterback, Sean Brackett, was also in China at the time. But how did that all kind of develop? Was Jawad always interested in going into, a sports management type of role as a player? Did you talk to him about it then, or did you just make the connection then and then get in touch about him starting the Pirates and working with the team down the line?
All right, here's how it all came about. I did meet Jawad in China, and one of the jobs I had was to actually go to every practice, and I had to do coaches film at the practices as well as, my writing. This is why I didn't get a chance to go all the places I wanted to go to. The writings, the videos, and then I would work probably 6 to 7 hours a day at practices, 2 hours, for 6 teams each. So there was a lot of time we spent, and you always had 2 teams practicing together, basically in the same location. But I met Jawad there, covered him as he played, had a chance to talk to him, and then the group that took me over to China, I joined them after the tour was over, probably for about another 18 months until they kind of went out of business. But oddly enough, we produced the Maxwell Football Club Awards as part of that as well. So I got a chance to meet a lot of, the upcoming, interview guys like Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield. And,
I've seen the Baker one.
Okay. Where I got him to play GM of the Eagles. Yeah.
Yes.
And he was a great guy. You knew he had that flexibility. It just wasn't a real dry interview. He was something. But when that job was ending, I started calling all around. I said, I got to find a game. It looked like my AFL stuff was gonna dwindle. I produced the Arena Bowl 30 with that crew. And then it was like, all right, well, got to find something. I started calling around, and I said, Massachusetts Pirates. I never heard of them. They were just starting. And Jawad answered the phone. He goes, Mick, it's Jawad. Hey, Jawad, how you doing? I said, I'm looking for a gig, and I'm looking for a broadcaster. Okay. So, it all kind of worked out.
Oh,
well,
that's
awesome. Kind of funny. Yeah. I mean, this team here in Worcester, they had you, Jawad, and Sean all in China. That's where you guys all first met. And now here we are in Worcester, Massachusetts in the indoor football league.
Yeah, but the best linebacker on Jawad's team was Amir Ishmael, and he was the first head coach of the Pirates. So that connection was there as well. And then another guy who, who does the games with me is JJ Rattery, who was not an old AFL quarterback. He'd hit me upside the head if I said that. He was a very experienced AFL quarterback, and he went to China, and he worked doing some of the media over there with us as well. And they said, you think you can get JJ to do the games with us? And JJ said yes. So that connection that I made way back in the Quad Cities in 2007 has now continued to today as we get ready for the first year in the IFL.
And Mick, before we get into the IFL, I want to again circle back to, you've been with the Pirates since the first time that they stepped on the field. So if you may, I'd like for you to take us through years 1 and 2 in review and kind of highlight, some of the highs, some of the lows, and where do you think the 2018 team and then the 2019 team, where they improved the most during their seasons?
All right. Well, let's go back to, I was actually taking some notes, so I may refer to them. But in 2018, the Pirates had the best regular season record, 11-5. And I think one of the keys to that team is that when Jawad put it together, he had many veterans. Mm-hmm. And they brought that calming influence. There was a lot of arena experience, maybe more so than, definitely more so than what they had in the following season. But go back to the offense. You had Sean Brackett, who had played as a backup he played in Las Vegas. I think he had a stop I know he had a stop in Jacksonville because I met him in Jacksonville before we went to China. And so when he comes to Pirates, he's experienced. They had 5 receivers, 5 legit receivers, and 2 of very big stature. You had Marty Gilliard, Devin Brown, Bones Bagante, Lamar Bryant, and I'm leaving. And Levon Pearson. So you had 5, standout receivers. Doesn't get much better than that. And Brackett had easy to look off and go to another guy who's going to make a big play. So that was going on. The defense had some defensive backs who Keontae Northington was kind of like the rookie of the group. He only wound up with 12 interceptions. And John Hardy Tuliao was a guy with some IFL experience. So they had, and Cheatham Norrells, who had some, pretty good experience as well. Plus, they picked up Khalid Wooten near the end of the year. You had solid defensive backs, great receivers. He had the sack king, J.D. Griggs.
Yep.
Also, let's see. Well, you had some other, pretty big defenders on that team as well. So they were stacked. And if Brackett doesn't get hurt in Jacksonville in the next to the last game of the season, they probably win it all. They went to Jacksonville early and won down there. They lost a shootout, one of the highest scoring games that Pirates ever played in Carolina. So that team was poised. Brackett got hurt, and the rest was history. They just couldn't compete. The following year, that team didn't have as much what I'm going to call arena experience. I'm going to say 17 players out of the gate they might have had some little NFL experience. They might have had, college experience, but they just didn't have that indoor football experience. And I think it took time to learn it. Pirates got off to 1-4 start.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about, they did the documentary Now or Never.
Yep.
I think when you really look at Now or Never, it was when Jawad decided he had to shake things up. And he traded Levon Pearson, who at the time was his all-time leading receiver, and I think had the Pirates record for most receiving touchdowns.
Wow.
And traded him to Carolina. And to take his place, he signed Dexter McCluster, who was a former NFL All-Pro. Now, when you go back and you talk about, trades, at the end of the year, Levon Pearson's numbers were top 5 in the league in a lot of categories, and Dexter didn't have those kind of numbers. So you could say, well, that was numbers wise, that trade didn't make sense. I think what made sense was Dexter brought a whole new mentality. And when you let your number 1 all-time guy go, like what the heck just happened? Now we got this NFL guy who was a calming influence, brought a different kind of work ethic, turned it around. And at the same time, they brought back Khalid Wooten. Now, yes, Lawrence Austin developed into a real good defensive back, and Chucky Williams was a great hitter, maybe the most physical lead back in the league. And, Chucky Williams is scheduled to come back to the Pirates this year.
Mm-hmm.
But when they started, they didn't have arena experience. And it's different because, and I'm not going to get too technical, but because that's not my place, I let JJ do those kind of things, but you undercut a lot of routes because if the ball's got to be perfect if it's going over your head or it's going out of bounds. There's not much room left. So go ahead and try to jump in front of a receiver. Try to undercut that route. It wasn't happening early. When Khalid came back, the team went on like a 6-game win streak, and Dexter changed the culture a little bit. Because I never heard guys, I'll give you an example. We're flying back from one game, and it might have been a game where I can't remember which game it was. But I remember the players kind of jawing back and forth, verbal sparring in a friendly way. Yeah, well, when I was in college, you couldn't have stuck with me in college. Yeah, I could have. I played at Auburn. Wow, I was in Mississippi. And you didn't get that before. You had it on this team. They bonded better. They turned the corner, and they might not have had as much talent, but it was a different kind of talent, and that's what got them into the playoffs.
So yeah, so you mentioned there were guys on the Pirates in the past who maybe had success in college, maybe spent some time briefly in the NFL, but they weren't comfortable with the indoor game. And now the Pirates, obviously, this coming season are playing their first season, like we said, in the IFL and moving away from the NAL. Now, obviously, the IFL and NAL are both indoor leagues, although the rules in the IFL are a little bit different. The style of play is a little bit different. For the first time ever, the Pirates entered the season with a traditional running back in Justin Stockton. They don't just have 300-pound short yardage fullbacks. But do you think it'll be a struggle or any type of challenge for the team moving from the NAL to the IFL?
No, and I think Quavon Hicks is going to take exception to that. He was a running back that the Pirates did get from Columbus, Georgia. But regardless, he's a good friend of mine. Anyway, I find that I don't think it'll be as difficult because you do have some players that played in the IFL. J.D. Griggs, in particular, has IFL experience. And talking to a friend of mine the other night, he says, the one thing is that linebackers here can blitz. The middle linebacker's got to identify himself as a blitzer on certain plays. If the jack linebacker, he doesn't have to stay in the box. He can roam a little bit, but if he's going to be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, I believe he has to be at least shoulder to shoulder with a receiver. That's something they haven't done a lot of, and that's where you're going to find, I think, that learning curve maybe early in games, penalty for not playing that textbook rule. Other than that, I think they're going to be okay. I really do. You're going to have two guys in motion, and traditionally in the IFL, you see a little more of a running game. So yeah, they're going to have to. And I hear that more or less the really good teams do about a 50-50 split, which is something that Sean Brackett hasn't been accustomed to, but he's savvy enough to get through that. So I think they'll be okay. I really do.
And Mick, speaking of Brackett, he's one of the fans know who Brackett is. You mentioned J.D. Griggs. So Brackett, Griggs, some of the other guys that stand out who are returning for 2021 are Thomas Owens, the reigning NAL Rookie of the Year, and Chucky Williams. We've referenced him a couple times on this episode of Pirates Weekly. He made second team All NAL last year. So for those four, and perhaps if you think of a couple of other returners off the top of your head, what do you feel like the expectations are going to be for some of these guys as they enter a new league and as they return to the Pirates?
Well, I think for the players who are coming back, they're definitely thrust into a leadership role right off the bat. And you're going to need those leaders, not just offense, defense, and then by position, secondary. I won't go off the top of my head. I did my homework, Oliver. You have 4 on the offensive side, and you have 7 on the defensive side. So, yes, you do have Thomas Owens and Sean Brackett, Alejandro Benefield, who started in one game and won his only start last year against New York, and then Ronell Hall. Now, Hall only played in a regular season finale and then in the playoff game and had 2 touchdowns in each game. So he did have a little NFL experience as well. So I believe those guys are a great place to start and build around. Now, I mentioned last year, maybe to the detriment to the Pirates when they had McCluster and Devin Brown and Marty Gilliard, I could look them all right in the eye. And Thomas Owens was the only guy who was 6'1". So this year I want to see how Darren Carrington, he's on the roster, he's 6'3". You got to have a big receiver, and that's one thing the Pirates are kind of lacking a little bit last season. Now, defense, 7 coming back. Willie Yarberry only played a little bit, a Wake Forest grad, thrust into a linebacker role. He was not really a linebacker, and he kind of learned on the fly a little bit, especially in the playoff game. But he's an educated guy, and he'll figure a lot of things out. He just missed out really getting a shot in the NFL, and I'm sure that he's still working toward that. We talked about J.D. Griggs, R.J. Roberts. who came back for one game last year, was a machine in 2018 with the Pirates. So you expect the same kind of level coming from Roberts. Tavares Dantzler gets overlooked a little bit, but a big hitter. And when he was on the field, the defense played well. So right there, I think if you had to say, where's the strength? You look at Yarberry, Griggs, Roberts, and Dantzler. And that's pretty good up front. Al Lewis Jean comes back in the secondary. And then you have Chucky Williams and Khalid Wooten. So right there, I think you have to, when you talk about skill positions, defensive backs and receivers, in this league, in a high scoring league, that's where the action is. So you can put pressure on your quarterback. You have guys who can cover defensively, and you have some people who offensively get it. So I think the upside's pretty high for the Pirates right now. So that's 11. So if you carry 21 on the roster right now, today, you have 11 coming back. So now there is a rule that you can only, if you had 3 seasons, you're a veteran. And I think you can only carry 7 veterans in the IFL on your roster. So that's where the juggling starts to come in.
Well, and you mentioned also, I believe it was Willie Yarberry. You said, got a little bit of a taste of the NFL, couldn't stick around, wants to get back. I know one reason why the Pirates wanted to move over to the IFL is to play against the best indoor football competition in the entire country. And do you think that with the move to the IFL, that could make it easier for the Pirates organization to be kind of a pathway to the NFL for guys who were overlooked? And also, are there any particular players on the roster? I know last year Brackett was supposed to have an NFL workout at Boston College. The pandemic got in the way of that. But are there any particular players on the roster you think could really have a shot to suit up in the NFL one day?
That's a hard question to answer, and it's not because I'm ducking it or don't think they have the talent. The NFL is position specific. And a lot of teams will say, I need that. It could be somebody to play on special teams. It could be somebody in a secondary. That's where Chucky Williams was like the last cut of the LA Rams the year they went to the Super Bowl.
Mm.
And I always like to say, boy, they made a mistake.
Yeah.
And Chucky will say, yeah, they did. But that's, it's hard to say. Give you an example. One of the last things I had done with the Pirates was Toby Johnson had a workout, who was a big time pass rusher last year. And he says, oh, things are going well. And they like my tape and they like the way I move. And I'm going back home to Orlando to work out. And the phone didn't ring. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, and it's a shame. I mean, the guy has talent, and we'll see where he winds up. And it's hard to say. That's a real tough question.
Yeah, and obviously, the difference between indoor and NFL players, it's not huge, but those tiny little nuances and, whatever percentage difference it is, those inches go such a long way. And, in the NFL Combine, 0.2 of a second slower in your 40-yard dash could be the difference between getting drafted and not getting drafted. It's amazing, how whether it's, indoor football players, the Canadian League, how there are those guys who are so close but so far, and it just how tough it is. And
it all depends. But sometimes when you go to camp, right? So I think Eagles linebackers, Singletary was a Canadian football leaguer, and got to camp, played really well. Guys got hurt. They needed him, and he produced. So he stuck. I mean, you just never know. I mean, luck of the draw, injury bug at the right time for, and somebody else's, gets hurt, works in your favor. So it's hard to say. I mean, there's a talent level that you can see the guys who can play. JJ and I talk about this all the time. He had a guy named Jesse Schmidt that he threw to in Iowa and in the Quad Cities. I said, whatever happened to Jesse? Jesse was like a physical specimen. had great speed, great hands. And he says, I don't know why he never made it. He says, to this day, I don't know why I never made it. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and people often ask me, why did Oliver never get into the NFL? Actually, I'm lying, completely lying. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to take a shot at Oliver. We have a lot of fun on the show together.
Oh yeah.
Now, Oliver and I do have something in common.
Yeah, I think I know what you're alluding to. You want me to take a
Go
stab at
ahead.
it?
Go ahead. Tell us.
So I believe the both of us have broadcasted at in Aberdeen, Maryland. Is that
That
it?
is correct. The home of the Ironbirds.
The Ironbirds, yeah. So actually, funny story. So this summer, I actually was down in Maryland broadcasting for a team called the Rockville Express, a summer collegiate baseball team in Maryland. The team was awesome, but our last games, last regular season games, and I think they might have been a playoff game, whereas at the Aberdeen Ironbirds complex in Aberdeen, Maryland. And I showed up, I was with my girlfriend. She came with me, and we showed up to the stadium, and, I go toward the Aberdeen Ironbirds, stadium. It's beautiful. It's like a AA stadium. And I go inside and I look at it, and I was fooled because I thought for some reason I would be broadcasting there. And I go in, I walk, and I speak to someone. I'm like, hey, where is everybody? Isn't there a game going on? And he's like, no, there's no game going on today. And I'm like, then I call like the coach of the team. I'm like, are you almost here? And he's like, yeah, we're not doing it there. We're across the street. So Mick, you and we've been across the street, and, no disrespect to, across the way. It's one of the craziest baseball, fields complexes I've ever been to, because I broadcasted at the so-called Yankee Stadium, where it's just, it's a field, and, it's the normal outfield, but right next to the Yankee Stadium is Fenway Park. They have a little monster there. And Mick, I'll let you take it from here. You got to broadcast with some pretty cool players.
Yeah, well, all that was built way after I was there. So,
Okay.
But it was all part of the Cal Ripken World Series, which is actually named after Cal Ripken Sr. And, Cal Jr. and Billy put it on, and it became its own like Little League World Series, because it's the Cal Ripken World Series, and where they have teams from. I did a game. I did the very first Cal Ripken World Series, and I had a chance to broadcast with Cal Ripken and Billy Ripken, and it was a lot of fun. I gotta tell you that. But it's the only no-hitter I ever called. I want to say It was Mexico. A kid from Mexico threw a no-hitter. Wasn't a perfect game, but it was a no-hitter.
I actually called a no-hitter this summer myself with the Rockville Express. It was a combined no-hitter. So
there you go.
Two players, and it was a game. It was a double header. So the double headers were only 7 innings because we did 2 in one day, but hey, it counted. So it was cool. And while the no-hitter was happening, I know I'm kind of getting a little off track, but while the no-hitter was happening, everybody, it was weird. I've never been around a no-hitter before. And, everybody was so quiet. Nobody was saying anything. And I broadcast right behind home plate. So I may have mentioned it once, and, my boss came over,
you get dirty looks
of the team, and he's like, we got to keep it quiet. It's like a baseball thing. So at the end, I was like, it's a no-hitter. So it was cool.
But I've done this things like college baseball. There was before Villanova built some dorms, but they used to play on their campus, and we'd set up right behind a backstop. And I was working, I think, with Dave Popkin, who does. Last I heard, he was doing Seton Hall. He does a lot of Seton Hall basketball. So we're saying, well, okay, what do you think here? Well, I'm probably setting up for a curveball. Well, I can see the signs because we got center field camera. The umpire comes over at the half innings and says, you can't. We can hear you. You can't say what pitch is coming.
Yeah,
you tip it off the hitters. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, we won't say that. But,
that can happen at the lower levels. Obviously in Major League Baseball, or the NFL, the broadcasters in a secluded area. I remember one time back, my first year out of college, doing community access TV for high school basketball, and they had the play-by-play announcer sit in the bleachers with the fans with a headset on. It was the most awkward thing ever. You're surrounded by fans, and you're like trying to see what's going on in the court. And I remember one time a player's father was sitting next to me and live on the air corrected my pronunciation of his son's name. So I feel like every broadcaster has some type of story like that in broadcasting at the lower levels and having a weird setup.
Oh, sure. I remember doing a football game, high school game in Nebraska from almost like a glorified tree hut, and you're kind of like sitting with your legs hanging over. So hold on to the pole and look out for time and score because otherwise you fall out. Yeah. Oh, we all do that. I mean,
you gotta do what you gotta do.
But now I've been really lucky. I mean, I had a chance especially with Comcast. I mean, I wrote down some names and I want to just run through them football wise. Billy Taylor, Jared Bunch, Lou Benfatti, Bruce Harper, Brian Baldinger, and a guy who was not a player, but Andy Wabel, who is now one of the directors of player personnel for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, yeah, I had a chance to work with some pretty neat people for sure.
So, Mick, I want to hit you with one more non-Pirates related question. You've called a lot of games. You've called, a bunch of Pirates games, and you'll be calling Pirates games in the future. Mick, other than Pirates games, what's the favorite game, your most favorite game that you've ever broadcasted?
Well, there's a couple. I'm going to say the China Bowl, because it came down to a missed field goal. There was a penalty. They re-kicked it and made it. So once, it was Brackett's team. Qingdao Clipper looks like they've won the game. Nope. The Beijing Lions win the game. And their head coach was Clint Dozell, and we'll see him. He's a friend of mine, of course, from the Philadelphia Soul. Now he's down in Frisco in this league. Mm-hmm. Replay 93. And what's that? For about 17 years, I did the Easton Phillipsburg football game, which is played at Lafayette College. It's one of the oldest high school football rivalries in the country. And it's one of the only rivalries left where you have a team from Pennsylvania playing a team from New Jersey. So it's state versus state, right on the border of each state. In 93, it ended in a tie. It was the last year there was ties in football. So Gatorade said, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could get the players back and kind of play the game over again? 15, 16 years later. Gatorade said, yeah, that's what we want to do. Everybody in the community's got on board. Peyton Manning and his brother Eli were coaches for each team. They helped out. And I was flying back from the Quad Cities to do the game. And I'm in Detroit in an airport getting my connecting flight. And they go, tomorrow there's this game. Replay. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm calling it, So, yeah, that was a great game. It sold out in over 15,000 people. It sold out in 90 minutes. And then sometimes a game just comes to you. I was doing an AHL game, the Philadelphia Phantoms against the Ottawa Senators. And a fight broke out. Bench clearing brawl. Neil Little, Phantoms goalie, skates from one end to the other, jumps on a pile of players. People are getting thrown out left and right. It all settles down. Okay. Puck drops. Boom, they're at it again. Finally, the referee had to stop the game, called it, 10 seconds to go, couldn't finish it. There was not enough players left. They're all in the penalty box. So, yeah, I kind of enjoyed that game because it was so atypical. But there, from college games at Penn State or Pitt or, at the Vet, Penn relays with Dwight Stones, those things, they're all great. But they're probably the three that jump out at me as far as some of my all-time favorites.
And Leverett, I know you have one more question for Mick, but I just want to follow that question up with, I took the Pirates out of it, but I'm going to throw the Pirates back in it now. You've called a bunch of Pirates games. So what's your favorite Pirates game?
Okay. I want to say it was a walk-off by LaVon Pearson. He had two in the same season in that first year, and they beat Carolina. Now, that might have been a Devin Brown walk-off touchdown. They had all these walk-offs next season. It was fantastic. What a great year of call. Every time you're out there, they score on the last play to horn blows. But I remember saying, gee, maybe the championship does run through Worcester.
That's
And it
cool.
turned out they had home field advantage, but Brackett got hurt, and the rest is history. But yeah, that was probably my favorite game because sometimes those phrases come to you, and that one came to me right there.
Well, and maybe this will be the Pirates' year in the IFL. They had some time, a couple different seasons in the NAL when they played really well during the regular season, and they didn't have the best luck in the postseason, as you would know. So maybe this is their year, and how cool would that be if they could win a championship during their first IFL season? But also, in regards to this season, Patrick Pass will be in his first season as the Pirates head coach. He was supposed to be the head coach last season, but obviously because of the pandemic, the NAL, the Pirates League at the time, couldn't play at all. But with Coach Pass, while it will be his first season as the head coach, he's not a stranger. He's been working with the organization prior, in a different role. But how excited are you to see him at the helm as the head coach, and how do you think he'll do as far as continuing to connect with the players and get the best out of them?
I think with what he brings as far as his experience is going to be unmatched. The Pirates haven't had somebody with that kind of cachet. Now he was there last year, but he wasn't there like all the time, but he was there on most of the game days. And the one thing that I really was impressed with is, he said what he had to say, but he would step back and he let the coaches coach. He didn't overstep. You know what I'm saying? He was there. He gave his support, saw things, interjected things, and then let the coaching staff do what they do. So I think he'll take the same approach as a head coach because, he has players and coaches at his disposal who have been in that arena setting. Yeah, he'll put his stamp on what he wants to do. And the fact that, and this may really come into play, the fact that, he was a fullback / running back in some occasions. You run more in the IFL, I think he'll have a hand on, a little more. And I've always heard it, offensive linemen love run blocking because once they know they can run somebody over, they're going to do it again and again and again. So that's something I'm looking forward to seeing as well. I think that's where you'll see maybe Patrick make his biggest influence.
Yeah, and you mentioned, his past experience as a player and how it's unmatched. There was a quarterback he played with during his Patriots days. New England sports fans may have heard of him. His name was Thomas, something along those lines.
You're talking about that new guy who's down in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, now he goes now he's Mr. Tampa Bay. But yeah, he may have won a championship or two around here. But yeah, working with Belichick and Brady, I can't picture anyone better to learn from in the world of professional football. So maybe Bill Belichick. I don't know if you saw the last game against who did they play? The Bills. Yeah, when Belichick broke his phone. Maybe as far as like telephone safety, Belichick's not the best guy, but as a football mentor, can't get much better than that.
Well, he's gonna have some people at his disposal that I'm sure he's gonna dispose of if they're not doing them in a Patrick Pass fashion. So he definitely has that going for him. There's no doubt about it. And it's a different game, but I think a lot of times the mentality is the same.
Yeah, well, and as the upcoming sideline reporter this season, I hope his interviews are more interesting than Belichick's interviews, because it's another way. While Belichick's a great coach, he's maybe not the most interesting guy to talk to.
Well, I tell you this, I tried to get Patrick to do some interviews, in 2018, and he wanted to stay in the background. So I haven't really seen his interview prowess. Okay.
He's learned the Patriot way. Say nothing.
Yeah. But I will tell you this, I give you a little tip. He's a grill master. He loves to grill. So if you talk about chops and steaks to maybe break the ice, I think you could be in good shape.
Thanks for that tip.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Well, Leverett is a sideline reporter and team insider, and I'm a team insider. I'll be there for the games as well. That's a great tip to know. Mick Moninghoff, thank you so much for joining us on episode 5 of Pirates Weekly. It's been an absolute pleasure, and for the off season, continue to stay safe, and hopefully we can have you on again soon. We would love to.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. I've been already scouring the IFL and looking at the players who I know and coach. I've actually know 3 different coaches in this league, so that's going to help a little bit too.
Yeah, we will definitely talk more IFL next time and some more of the Pirates' newer players. But we wanted to hit upon the Pirates past with you because you've been there the entire time. Some of the players that have been here. So again, Mick, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your night.
And you too. Thanks for having me on.
Oliver Nissi alongside Leverett Ball. Mick Moninghoff joined us this episode for episode 5, Pirates Weekly. That's a wrap in this episode presented by Bud Light.